Luis and Kristen.
Oh, nice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And still the board of directors at Buckholder?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the time or just remind me? Let me know when you're ready.
I think this works. Could we use my phone to that, like?
Sure, as long as it won't distract you.
No. Thank you.
Yeah. So, good morning again, members of this new board of directors of Navarra. Because of some of you who couldn't attend the meeting yesterday, we would like to make sure we're all on the same page and tell you a short story about one of your clients. The story is about Rodrigo, a typical customer of your retail company. He was a very humble boy that was born and raised in Chile and grew up there, and he wasn't a very good student, but at the age of 17, he was offered a sports scholarship by the University of Michigan to go and fulfill his dream in America of becoming a professional swimmer. However, the unstable financial situation in his family made him refuse the offer, so he stayed in Chile for 10 years working in a car manufacturing plant, assembling doors and trunks until 2008, when he was fired due to the global financial crisis. So in that same year, he was one day looking around at one of your stores, just standing in front of this magnificent high-definition television he had always wanted, but he just couldn't afford it. And a very kind and smart shop assistant approached him and told him about several special discounts that were being offered due to the 2008 Olympics that were about to take place in a few days in Beijing, and that precisely had Michael Phelps, who went to the University of Michigan, as a promising star. Unfortunately, he had to refuse again because it was still too expensive. But then the assistant told him about the possibility of getting your credit card, financing the purchase, and just pay whenever he had the money. And that's what he did. He was supposed to pay in 6 months, but he didn't because he wasn't employed. After 18 months, he did find a job, and he planned to repay all his debts. Unfortunately, he found out that the total amount of the debt after 18 months was almost 20 times the price of the original television. The case of Rodrigo is not an isolated one. Thousands of your customers had their credits unilaterally renegotiated. And this is what the old board of directors permitted. Okay, so the results have been dramatic. The value of your shares has dropped up to 40%. You've lost the confidence from the market, and you lack a solid corporate structure that guarantees an ethical behavior both inside the company and externally. But before we jump into our suggestions, I would like to make an important point, and it is that this is not like the classical business ethics case where you have a single dilemma and a single decision to make, and you just have to, let's say, evaluate a certain behavior. There are so many agents involved in here. And when I say agents, I mean all the stakeholders. It could be easy to blame it on the old board of directors, and kind of fair, but we have to take into account other behaviors. What about rating agencies? What about the auditing company? What about Rodrigo himself? So because of this, we have to focus on a certain level of ethics, and we decided to focus on the level of management. And from now on, what my colleagues are going to do is that they're going to explain our suggestions on the different measures we suggest to apply in the short run.
Thank you very much, Juan. So what to do next now that everything has happened? We've lost the confidence of the market. Now we're gonna recommend some measures, some ethical policies that we believe that implementing these will improve the image of the company and make things right. So first of all, we need to implement these ethical measures in order to control and ensure that this kind of situation does never happen again. And later on, it is essential to gain back the trust from our stakeholders and all the market. We want to do this through people like Rodrigo, so we want to make things right with him first. We want to suspend the unilateral renegotiation and make sure that he can actually pay what he actually owed, and then make him tell everyone else in the market that we're actually doing things right and that we want to gain their trust again and that we really are capable of doing things right. The first ethical policy that we need to implement is a values statement and a code of conduct. It is the basic thing to do for an ethical dimension of the company, and La Polar doesn't have it right now. We want to make sure that La Polar has values such as transparency, commitment, and integrity. Also, it is essential to change the formal structure of the company. We want to create an internal audit committee and an ethics committee. On the one hand, the internal audit committee will manage the risks that the firm is willing to take in their processes, and it won't only be a mere function of control, but also increase value through the improvement of all processes. On the other hand, the ethics committee will be in charge of ensuring transparency and compliance in all the processes within the company. The members of this committee should be the HR and the legal officer, some shareholders' representatives, and the president should be the chief ethical and compliance officer. This is a figure that is essential in every organization and that La Polar doesn't have right now. We feel that this figure should be filled with a highly qualified executive that needs to have high levels of independence within the company to make sure that the measures he or she believes should be taken are actually implemented. Finally, I'm going to turn it over to Luis, who's going to implement the other policies.
Perfect. Thank you. So we want to make sure that the culture within the company is changed. So for that, we suggest that you adopt 2 new policies. One of them is have two communication channels to report the unethical behavior, to report the violations the violations to the code of conduct, the actual violations or the suspected violations. So for that, we suggest 2 channels. An internal one that would be reporting to the human resources team, and an external one. For that, we encourage that you contract an external company that would be the reporting hotline. These channels should be available 24/7, and you should be able to access them via the internet, email, telephone, or regular mail. However, to make sure that everyone in the company it behaves in an ethical manner, we suggest that you implement some training programs. These training programs should be done on a regular basis, and they are mandatory for everyone to do, from the management level to the people that are contracted and everything. So we're not going to go into the content of each training program, but I'm simply going to give some characteristics of what these training programs should have. Each training program should target a specific behavior contained in the code of conduct. These training programs should be relatable to what the employees do on a day-to-day basis. They should also be interactive so that the employees have an active role, an active participation. Also, in these training programs, there should be a reinforcement of the learned behaviors so that they are actually learning how to do things right. We also believe that in these training programs, the use of the communication channels should be really encouraged, so that we guarantee that the culture is changed, and we guarantee that whenever there's an unethical behavior within the company, the board of directors is aware of it and is able to make changes. Now I will leave on to my colleague Juan to conclude the presentation.
Sure, as you see, your ethical analysis is focused on policies, but I don't want to put an end to this short presentation without making at least a short reference to 2 of the largest corporate frauds that have ever happened in history, which are the global financial crisis of 2008 and the case of Enron. Unfortunately, it's interesting how we all keep on making the same mistakes. The global financial crisis started with a very permissive granting of credit, as it happened with your company a few years ago. And then, of course, the magnitude of the case of Enron is much greater. But again, we had the same structure. We had the stock options and we had an accounting fraud. And it was all organized by the management of the company. So, because of this fact that we all make the same mistakes once again, it's very important that you start from the very beginning. This is why our policies start from a thing which is a value statement or a code of conduct, but then implement more complex things like a training program or communication channels. You have to keep in mind that policies are just mere policies and they won't work because of the fact that you implement them. You have to keep in mind that this change has to be led by people, that ethics is about human behavior, and that the most important thing is that the new people that you incorporate to your company is committed to this new change. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terrific.